Hey, what's up, y'all? And of course, welcome to another Alternative Factuals video. And like I promised, this is the second video coming out on, I believe, Friday. This is going to get released so that we can finish the week off on a positive note. Since we are already in August, and obviously the fall TV shows are going to start making its way back around late September, early October, let's kind of start preparing for Black Lightning, because I know a lot of you guys want to know like the Black Lightning news, or you just want to keep things juicy and rejuvenated as we wait for the season 3 premiere, which actually got moved up to an earlier date. But before I dive into any of those details or anything like that, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think about Black Lightning and the team and all the information regarding him in terms of season 3 and his crossover and stuff like that. Anything Black Lightning related, just let me know in the comments. You know how I like to answer comments and stuff like that. And without further ado, let's kind of dive into this. Okay, so the season 3 premiere of Black Lightning is actually moved up 2 weeks from its original date. So the latest installment of the network's DC show will actually be, I think it's on Monday, October 7th at 9 p.m. So the usual time that it usually would come on at 9 p.m., but instead it got moved up 2 weeks to October 7th. So that's just something I want to start off the video with. So just in case you're expecting it to be 2 weeks later, a little later in the month of October, then you're going to miss out on a couple episodes. But let's kind of dive into this video. So I wanted to do something more like a recap where I go over very specific very important details that happened in season 2, which I'm willing to bet the farm is going to play a part in season 3. Now, some may not be as big of a deal compared to like other details that I might mention in this video, but nonetheless they do feed into some aspects of season 3 due to the nature of character development, maybe even plot devices, as well as introductions of other characters. So let's kind of go over this fun little list I kind of developed here. So in season 2 episode 1, we have the Book of Consequences chapter 1, Rise of the Greenlight Babies. Now, this episode is not extremely important, but the only reason I put this on the list was because, one, it was definitely the episode portraying how much has changed from season 1 to season 2 and the effects of the Greenlight Babies in Greenland. I say Greenland, in Freeland. And also, I want to make a point that this is also where Jefferson's investigation on his whereabouts, where he was when Khalil and Tobias were attacking the school, this is where everything is kind of unraveling in terms of his career as a principal and the possibility that he was actually going to possibly lose his job completely, and period. But instead, we know now that he became a teacher, and this is also the introduction of the whole ASA, where they really dive into Agent Percy Odell, who is really one of those people who has his own ulterior motives, but he hasn't quite revealed them yet because he's one of those people who doesn't put all his cards on the table. So remember that. Season 2, episode 1, The Book of Consequences, Rise of the Greenlight Babies. Extremely important, and it was actually a pretty good episode. Alright, second important episode is Book of Consequences chapter 2, Black Jesus Blues. Now, this is the second episode in the second season. I'm not going in order, I promise. But this episode in particular is important simply because this is the episode where they free some of the pod kids. A couple of them escape, and the ASA scientists, as well as like Lynn, they start to discover a little bit more about these kids' abilities and what they're capable of, as well as some of the kids that are in the community. And basically they're kind of trying to understand how these abilities work and how unstable they are due to the initial introduction of their genetics with the previous version of the Greenlight. So this is where you kind of get a dive into, or more of a transitionary period into, this is what Lynn is going to be doing. This is how her involvement with the ASA is going to go. Also, this is where the type of approach that they're taking when it comes to these new kids and their abilities, especially since they're going to be working for the government, so to speak, indirectly, that we found out at the ending of season 2. So this is more like a launching off point. Now, like I said, it's not super important. I think it's actually less important than episode 1, but nonetheless, it is important because at this point, this is where things start to really kind of take off, coming from the perspective of the ASA and what their goals are, at least what they want us to think their goals are. All right, so this is season 2, The Book of Consequences, chapter 4, Translucent Freak. Now, this is episode 4, obviously, and this is more or less just Jennifer dealing with her, powers. Remember, she's still struggling at this point to control her powers, and early in this season, she actually didn't really want anything to do with her abilities, and she was still trying to figure out what to do. And this is her therapy session with Perena, who we found out has some sort of psychic ability where she can actually read the minds of people, as well as create these spaces in their mind in order for them to deal with their like personal issues at a face-to-face kind of, situation. It's instead of being out in the real world, they can do this in a single therapy session. And remember, inside your mind, time is not linear, so that's what made her really effective as like a therapist in helping Jennifer understand the totality of her powers. And remember, she had these visions of fighting Painkiller, aka Khalil, because obviously they were dating. She had feelings towards him, and she was still dealing with feelings towards Tobias, and just all this stuff that involved him, and the fact that Tobias was also smuggling various different things in this episode. I think what was it, if I remember correctly, if I read this, this episode is also where Tobias's lawyer actually kind of smuggles in a bomb, or somebody who can bring in a bomb in order to bomb the clinic. So he's just basically doing his scrupulous stuff. That wasn't really too much of a big deal in a lot of ways, but this is more of an episode, I believe, that was focusing on Jennifer, even though she didn't quite have, she had screen time, but she definitely didn't have like a massive amount of screen time, but it was just circled around her and what was going on in her mental psyche. Now, this is episode 5 of season 2, The Book of Blood, chapter 1, Requiem. This is basically the episode Gambi is driven off the road and he perceives to be killed. And Jefferson is actually grieving. He refuses to believe he's dead. He starts an investigation, kind of starts to spiral out of control. He goes to this bar. He's like, mentally, he's all over the place, because despite the fact that, recently he found out that, the information that he gave Jefferson's biological father was the reason why he ended up dead. In a lot of ways, Gambi was that father figure for many, many years. Even after Gambi saw that he had abilities, Gambi continued to keep it as a secret. He did what he had to do. He raised him, make sure he was good. He made sure that he joined the Olympics. He did everything he could as a father figure. So it was a little bit of a shocking blow, but ultimately, due to this episode, they did get over it. At least on Jefferson's end. But ultimately, this episode did establish that the show is nowhere near afraid to kill off a main character. Gambi is a founding character for this TV show, as well as he was in the comic books when it came to Black Lightning Year 1 and all that details. Like, this was really important. Gambi was a crucial moment in Black Lightning's life, and if anything, they're letting you know that at some point he is going to die in this season. You never know when, but when it happens, you'll know. Now, the following episode after that was The Book of Blood, Chapter 2, The Purdy. And this episode was more of a filler episode. It's not really important. But the only reason, and I'm going to be quite honest, that this episode was even important, period, was simply because Gambi was revealed to be alive. Then, he wasn't dead. And, that's basically pretty much it. Nothing deeper than that. The Purdy were basically just a filler to kind of lead you into what was going on with Anissa's girlfriend, and but it wasn't really too much of a big deal. Okay, so the Book of Rebellion, chapter 1, Exodus. This episode is important because this is when Painkiller makes a full turn against Tobias. Season 1, you already knew he was down with Tobias because he gave him the ability to walk again, gave him enhanced strength, his blood became poisonous, and basically acted as an anesthetic to put people to sleep and paralyze them, thus giving him the name Painkiller. However, in season 2, all the way up until this point, Painkiller was struggling with his alliance with Tobias because, 1, he saw that Tobias was absolutely out his cotton picking mind, but 2, Tobias was someone where he doesn't care who you are. He's basically going to treat you like garbage. The only people he really cared about was like people like Cyanide and his sister, where they could have an opinion and then he would respect it, even though he didn't always like it, but he would never hurt them. He always looked out for them, and that's mostly because he grew up with these people and he had an attachment with them, and he knew that they were loyal to him. Absolutely. Everyone else he had very little to no trust towards, and he definitely will treat you like garbage to make you want to leave in the first place. So in this episode, Tobias had placed out a bounty on Painkiller, and he wanted him brought back alive. And then at that point, this is Black Lightning Thunder, and Gambi began to search for Jennifer because at this point she started to kind of run away and help Painkiller move away from Tobias. And Tobias is also visiting his mom. Basically, they're running around trying to find an escape because Tobias placed a bounty on him, which makes the next episode more important as well, which is episode 9 of season 2, which is the Book of Rebellion, chapter 2, Gift of Magi, which is due to the wound that he received from his fight with Cutter. Now, Cutter was a connection that Tobias had way back in the day. They had an old little relationship. They were a little fling, and Tobias trusted her to bring him in, and ultimately he got cut, which her knives had poison, and then Jennifer had to find a way to get him well, and she had to sneak into the hospital. And basically this is showing the relationship between Painkiller and Jennifer, and the reason why them two are so closely correlated, and the reason why, as well as the motivation on why she chooses to probably become a superhero, not only later in this season but going forward in season 3. 3. Now I'm going to skip all the way to the Book of Secrets, Chapter 3, Pillar of Fire. Now this is episode 13 of season 2, and obviously this is the episode where I feel like things are kind of reaching its climax, and then eventually it's going to start to kind of dwindle down because it's going to transition into season 3. But this is the episode where Adele tells Lynn that the Markovians basically have been making metahumans for years, and suspecting that the Markovians who attacked her were very much interested in what she was doing with the ASA, as well as they were interested in the pod kids and their abilities, meaning she was basically someone who knew what she was doing when she was developing these cures or ways to treat these kids with metahuman abilities, because she was just so talented when it came to her and her biological background in terms of what she studied, and as well as how intelligent she was when it came to metahumans. So she was definitely a primary target because she was someone who can literally turn the tide of a battle when it comes to a metahuman war. And imagine having someone like her on the Markovian side helping them develop more metahumans, which they already have some already. And then at this point, Garfield is one of the largest to have a huge, massive amount of metahuman teens and individuals, and it's going to be a challenge of power for them. She really is important at this point. Season 2 was the season in which they made Lynn's role as not only Black Lightning's wife, but as someone who is a biologist who studies people with metahuman abilities. She is made important in this season, and she will continue to be important into season 3 due to the nature of what she's quite talented at. Now this is episode 14, the Book of Secrets, Chapter 4, Original Sin. Now this episode I thought was the most interesting one because the character that brought basically Lala back to life was actually the same dude who played this is a little old throwback reference to all of those African Americans out there who have their parents who made them watch the 5 Heartbeats. You know this part when you see when he had the shiny suit under the jacket, and he was just like, dang. But if you've seen the 5 Heartbeats, the movie, you know what I'm talking about, and I'm pretty sure you'll leave a comment down below.
Takes more than love to build it up, to build.
But this is basically where Lady Eve's old associate actually resurrects Lala to help bring revenge onto Tobias after, Lady Eve's death. And he confronts Pierce and basically in the school, and at this point he's trying to get a grasp of not only his mental state, but the choice he has to make. Either he can go back to doing what he was doing, or he can make a choice to actually, in some weird twisted way, not only get even with Tobias, but find some way to make Freeland free of him. Now this episode did not have a whole lot of action, to be honest with you, and the reason why I appreciated this episode so much in a lot of ways was because majority of this episode, about like 20 something minutes or 30 minutes of this episode, took place in a single classroom, and it was just simply conversation. Now I don't know if I'm geeking out over script writing and dialogue right now, because that is what I do in my spare time, but this is one of the most well written, interesting episodes because 1, it didn't take place in too many places. It was almost pretty much in one classroom. 2, the dialogue between them were just phenomenal, and it wasn't so much of them trying to convince each other of what to do or what not to do, but in a lot of ways they were just trying to rationalize what was going on in their lives and basically cement the decisions that they have previously made throughout season 2. And this is where everything kind of hits the fan and where things are going to start to really launch off, and then at this point we transition into the season 3 events. Now season 2 episodes 15 and 16, the Book of Apocalypse, chapters 1 and 2, the Alpha and Omega, I'm going to combine into a single analysis or breakdown, or kind of just a single summary. And this is basically where everything comes together. Nissa, Jennifer, Pierce, they all fight Tobias. He basically gets locked up, and this is where you see that there are other metahumans out there that Tobias was actually using for his own games. Basically some of the people who were in pods, he happened to come across them, and then he has Dr. Jace on his side. So he's using these resources to try and gain power and manipulate Freeland into getting what he wants, and then ultimately fails. Now Tobias gets thrown into this supermax prison, which I'm pretty sure would be very similar to the DC prison, which everyone goes to when you're enhanced human or you're a supervillain, and that's basically Iron Heights Penitentiary, which I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but you know, that's the main one that most people tend to go to. But overall, I feel like this is not the end of Tobias. He may be in jail, but ultimately he has tons of resources, tons of money, and he's capable of doing so much. So we already know at some point he is going to escape. Now, whether or not he's going to escape in season 3, that's really up to the writers. But I think for the most part, he's going to be in jail for season 3. But then towards the end of season 3, he's going to probably transition out of jail and look for other resources and look for other means to kind of defeat his enemies. So it was a nice little, you know, 2 episodes, basically the ending. It wasn't quite what I thought it would be. The fight was a little short between Black Lightning and Tobias, and Jennifer kind of had her moment where she, you know, broke out the van after Gambi kind of helped her recover because her powers overloaded her for a split second. But overall, it was enjoyable, and it was a solid season, basically 16 episodes in the season. So it was a comfortable amount. Nothing felt really rushed, and everything was well balanced for the most part. But this is basically everything you should know about season 2 going into season 3. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe and leave your comments. And I hope to see you later on. Peace out.